Hi, I'm Ellen from the Chili Dog. I'm getting ready to cast on another one of my toe up polarity socks, and I'm using a pinhole type cast on. This style of cast on can be done with just your knitting needles. But if you find that too fidgety, another option is to use a crochet hook. And the cast on is even easier to manage if you use a crochet hook that has a knitting needle on the opposite end, like this Addi Duett hook and needle combo. The pinhole or disappearing cast on is primarily used to start projects that are knit in the round and begin with a small number of stitches, usually 12 or less, like amigurumi, top down hats, or toe up socks, like the ones I'll be casting on today. As an added bonus, after casting on, I'll demonstrate how to move and divide your stitches from the crochet hook onto rigid double pointed needles, flexible double pointed needles, two long circular needles, or one long circular needle for the magic loop method so you can begin your small circumference knitting project. Let's get started. Before we begin, if you enjoy our videos, consider joining the pack and becoming a member of thechilidog.com for ad-free access to our entire learning library, priority support, and more. It is possible to do this cast on by working around a loop of yarn that's just been lightly wrapped around your finger. However, you may find it easier to manage as you're learning by starting with a slip knot. You need to make sure that the loop of the slip knot tightens when you pull on the yarn tail, or your pinhole won't close like it should. To do that, you're going to make a twist in your yarn so that the working yarn goes underneath the yarn tail. Then you can reach down through the loop, pinch the yarn tail, pull it partially through, and then pull on the working yarn to tighten the knot. When you pull on the yarn tail, it's going to close the loop. We'll be casting on our stitches around the yarn tail and the side of the loop that does not move when I pull on the yarn tail. So I'm going to hold those two sections together. I'll tension my working yarn by weaving it over, under the fingers on my left hand. And then pinch things together. I'm going to tighten up that loop just a little bit more to make it easier to manage. Now I'll cast on 8 stitches. To do that, the crochet hook goes down through the loop, underneath the working yarn. I'm going to hook that working yarn and use the hook to pull it forward through the loop. And then I'm going to secure this stitch by going under the working yarn, hook it, and pull it through. So that's my first cast on stitch. Again, to cast on, you go down through the loop, under the working yarn, hook the working yarn, pull it forward through the loop, and then secure the stitch by going under the working yarn, hook it, and pull it through. One more time, the hook goes down through the loop, under the working yarn, hook the working yarn, pull it forward through the loop, and then secure the stitch by going under the working yarn, hook it, and pull it through. So I'll cast on my remaining stitches. After all my stitches are cast on, I can pull on that yarn tail and that closes up the loop. But I'm not going to tighten it all the way quite yet until I have transferred my stitches onto knitting needles. But first, let's notice 3 things. Number 1, the knit side of my fabric is facing me. And I can tell because at the base of my cast on stitches, I see little V-shaped knit stitches, not the horizontal purl bumps that I see on the other side. Number 2, since I'll be knitting in the round, I need to knit the stitches in the same order that they were cast on. This was the first cast on stitch, so it will be the first stitch that I knit, and then I'll work across. And number 3, because of the way that we wrap the yarn around our hook, right now, the stitches on my needle have a reverse stitch mount, which means the leading leg of the stitch is at the back of the needle rather than at the front. So as I transfer my stitches onto knitting needles, I'll rotate them so they're seated on the needle with a customary stitch mount. When you knit in the round on rigid double-pointed needles, your stitches are typically divided evenly onto 4 needles, and then you knit with the 5th. Since I cast on 8 stitches, I'll place 2 onto each DPN. As I transfer them, I want to insert my knitting needle through the stitch purlwise from the back to the front, so that as the stitch drops off, it rotates and now has a customary stitch mount with the leading leg at the front of the needle and the trailing leg of the stitch at the back of the needle. So again, as I slip, I insert purlwise from back to front and then drop the stitch off. And I'm going to set things on the table as I'm transferring just to add a little bit of support so that my needles don't slip out as I'm transferring things. Two stitches onto the next needle. Turn slightly. Two stitches onto the third needle. Rotate slightly. And then 2 stitches onto the 4th needle. And after all my stitches have been transferred, I can pull on this yarn tail and magically the loop at the center tightens up, and then I'm ready to continue knitting around. And since my stitches are divided evenly onto 4 needles, the needle changes mark 1/4 of a round. When you knit in the round on flexible double-pointed needles, your stitches are typically divided evenly onto 2 needles, and then you knit with the 3rd needle. Since I cast on 8 stitches, I'll place 4 stitches onto each needle. As I transfer them, I want to insert my knitting needle purlwise through the stitch from the back to the front, so that when I slip it off, the stitch rotates, and now it has a customary stitch mount with the leading leg of the stitch here at the front of the needle, the trailing leg of the stitch at the back. So again, insert purlwise from the back to the front. So half my stitches go on one needle. I'll slide them down to the cord so they're held out of the way. And then I'll do the same thing and transfer the other half onto another needle. After all the stitches have been transferred onto the needles, you can close up that pinhole at the center by gently pulling on the yarn tail. That closes up the pinhole, tightens things up, and then you are ready to work in the round. And since my stitches are divided evenly on 2 needles, the needle changes mark half of a round. When you knit in the round on 2 long circular needles, typically half of the stitches will be held on and knit with one needle. Half of the stitches are held on and knit with the other needle. So since I cast on 8 stitches, I'll place 4 onto each needle. As I transfer the stitches, I'm going to insert the knitting needle purlwise from the back to the front so that as the stitch slips off, it rotates, and now it has a customary stitch mount with the leading leg of the stitch at the front of the needle, the trailing leg of the stitch at the back. Again, I'll insert my needle tip purlwise back to front and slip it up. So 4 stitches go on the first knitting needle. I'll slide the stitches down to the cord, and then 4 stitches will go on to the second knitting needle. And I'll slide them down to the cord as well. Once all of my stitches have been moved over to the needles, get everything out of the way so you can see, I can pull on the yarn tail, and that is going to close up that pinhole at the center of the stitches. So pulling the yarn tail tightens everything up. And then my stitches are divided evenly so that the needle changes mark half of a round, and I can continue knitting in the round. When you knit in the round on one long circular needle using the magic loop method, all of your stitches are going to be slipped on to your knitting needle, and then they'll be divided in half by popping the cord out at the midpoint. So to transfer stitches, insert the knitting needle from the back to the front purlwise, and when you do that, the stitch will rotate off, and now it has a conventional stitch mount with the leading leg of the stitch at the front of the needle and the trailing leg of the stitch at the back of the needle. So again, insert your needle tip purlwise from the back to the front and transfer all of your stitches. After all of the stitches have been transferred, you can slip them down to the cord, and then we're going to divide them in half evenly. So 4 stitches on each side, and we'll pop that cord out between the stitches. We still have that big hole at the center, but when you pull on the yarn tail, that tightens up that little pinhole, and we're ready to start knitting in the round. I hope you enjoyed learning how to do a pinhole cast on with an Addi Duett crochet hook knitting needle combo, as well as how to transfer your stitches onto 4 different small circumference knitting needle styles. If you did, make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more helpful knitting tips and tutorials. If you'd like to try this technique in a pattern, head over to the shop section of thechilidog.com and look for the toe-up version of our polarity socks. Until we stitch again, happy knitting!